Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussions, news, and interviews, presenting The Film Scene with Illeana Douglas. Illeana is an actress, writer, author, and film historian with a need to discuss movies that borders on obsession. You'll learn the history of movies one great story at a time. The Film Scene is the deep cuts of movie podcasts, featuring movies we love by the people who made them. And now, Illeana Douglas.
Hi, hello. We are live here on the Film Scene. Hello, Jeff.
Illeana Douglas, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too. It feels like it's been a week since I've seen you.
It feels like it's been a very locked-in week. At the risk of being redundant, I have to shout out your sweater's really popping today, Illeana. You look great.
Oh, thank you. You know, spring. It's the only time I get dressed up now is for the Film Scene. We have a lot to cover. I know there's some we're going to get to some questions, which I love, from Twitter. I want to recommend a couple books, while we're in quarantine. I went business this week because, usually I'm centered towards actor, but for people who want to be producers out there, I have to recommend this book, which is called The Agency. This is about the hidden history of show business and the history of William Morris. And, for you, if you want to be an agent or you want to hear about how agencies started in the age of, Lou Wasserman and Universal, it's all sort of covered here up until, the Mike Ovitzes in the 80s and the 90s. I love this book. It's very, very juicy. There's some good gossip in there. And then this book, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I mean, I'm going old school. It's called In All His Glory. There's so many bios out now. Bill Paley is the legendary tycoon who ran CBS. For many, many years, he was married to a socialite named Babe Paley. And he basically sort of set a tone at CBS and being the head of CBS for what all the network heads, good and bad, sort of followed in his model.
Interesting.
Meaning he was not faithful to his wife. He expected a lot of favors,
Wow.
Yeah.
CBS, has always kind of been known as a little bit of a boys' network until 3 years ago. And did it all kind of start with him?
This book is vital in your knowledge in terms of Me Too, in terms of the kind of shows that CBS is, the Tiffany Network, it all comes from him. And people, people have almost forgot the legacy that he created with CBS. Again, good and bad. He was really into news and news reporting, but he was a fascinating, good and bad tycoon for sure. So I highly, highly recommend this book by Sally Bedell Smith, In All His Glory. Great, we're getting up to the summer, great summer read.
I love it. I feel like CBS nowadays, if it's not a government acronym, it's not on CBS. It's FBI,
yes.
CSI, SWAT. It's all
totally true.
Procedurals.
So then my other big news, I'm very excited. I waited a week because I wanted to see how I was going to feel about it, but I joined Cameo.
I love it.
It is a service, for people to reach out to me and many other people. There's so many cool people on the site, and get a birthday greeting or a pep talk, kind of anything they want. And I'm donating the proceeds to an incredible charity, which is Jose Andres World Central Kitchen. So, I'm here in quarantine. We're all here. And I figure it's a great way for me to be able to give back to the fans. And so far, I have to say, I didn't know what to expect. I have been so into it. My goal is I want to be the Cecil B. DeMille of production in my cameos. I'm even thinking of, sneaking in guest stars.
I love it.
unannounced famous people that are my friends. Wouldn't that be fun?
Well, the thing is, Illeana, you've always had sort of a creative streak. I feel like so I'm sure you're kind of using it as an opportunity to actually be a little creative, have some fun.
Yeah, actually, my manager was like, "Well, you did one that was like 5 minutes long." I was like, "Okay, I'm like, kill me. I'm actually enjoy. I think it's fun, and I truly. It sounds corny, but I truly care, and I've always had that connection to my fans because I feel like I'm just like them. I love movies, and movies mean so much to me too. And, for instance, one guy was starting a job and he was very nervous about it. And I mean, I totally relate to that. And I actually feel like I have something to give back that could actually, be helpful. So I've totally been enjoying it. If anybody wants a cool, hopefully funny or, well-meaning shout out, hit me up. On Cameo. I'll once I get technically savvy, I'll hook it up with my Twitter and my Insta, or you can just go to Cameo and check me out there. Do we
Love
have
it.
any questions?
Yeah, well, I also want to, before we let the guys in talk about our parallel universes, Illeana, but we'll get to a question first.
Yeah, let's
This
start with you.
comes from, I'm going to your Twitter now,
Yep.
um, from Scott Pliskin, who asks, finished your book, loved it, great read. Question, what character are you supposed to be on the cover?
Oh, that's so funny. Well, the what happened with the cover was I sent that photo, which is me. I when we, I had a photography class in high school, and everybody was taking pictures of trees, and I thought it would be funny for me to be in all my pictures. So I was a series of different people, but in on the left hand side, I'd been to the set of Being There, and that was kind of my attempt to walk on water like Chauncey Gardner, and I sent it to my editor as a joke. Like, look at what a weird kid I was. He wrote me back, that's going to be the cover. And so the idea of it was this kind of weirdo movie kid became, the glamorous movie star on the right. I think that's, kind of what they were going for. But I was trying to be Chauncey Gardner. And I don't know how I did that photo. I mean, back in the day with a step, I took a canoe out in our pond, and then I had the camera set up on a timer on another ladder. It was extremely elaborate, but in those days we had a lot of time on our hands, so I got the picture. No negative. That's all I have is the photo. So
That's very impressive.
yeah,
There's one more really fun question in here, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer it because I feel like you've seen every film that's ever existed. But
okay.
Room Kid at Subatomic Freak asks, what are some of your blind spots for movies that you've never seen but really want to see? For him, he's never seen a Kurosawa before.
Yeah, that's well, for a long time my blind spot was actually Ingmar Bergman movies, and then when I did the Easy to Assemble show, I started watching all the Ingmar Bergman movies, and they blew me away. I was just it was revelatory in terms of his films on what I enjoyed. Another one that's a kind of a blind spot for me is a filmmaker named Eric Romer. He's a French filmmaker. He's known for making very, very long films, and every time I try to watch one, it just I kind of don't get it. The 80s and 90s start to get a little wanky for me because I was working quite a bit.
Mm.
I almost feel like that's a little bit of a blind spot is maybe the early 90s films that I'm not aware of as much because I was off doing, doing indies. But I always love discovering a new film. So that would be it for me.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I will say we do have the guys here, and we do need to wrap by 4. But if we want to talk parallel universes, we could.
Let's just please, because I think it's going to fit into Homecoming, which he also offers a sort of a parallel universe, type show. I think the this brief little mention that NASA may have found a parallel universe, which is something I've always totally believed in, it would make sense for deja vu. There's so many things.
I know.
Doppelgangers that it would fit into. Why we see UFOs and then they don't come to Earth. All sorts of things.
I believe it. I mean, when I get bored, I like to dive down the TED Talk rabbit hole, and I love those, videos on quantum physics and
Yes.
string theory. And the more we discover about physics, the more likely it is that there are probably parallel universes. So crazy, crazy stuff.
We'll have to, we'll talk more about this next week because I'm fascinated by it. It was just sort of a bomb that they dropped.
So casually.
Like, we've confirmed people are psychic, now more politics, which is another thing because I think everybody is psychic.
Do you?
Yes, I believe it is a sixth sense. I believe that everybody has a sixth sense. They just don't utilize it.
That makes sense. I mean, I think actors have to, right?
Yes.
You have to tap into your intuition, but a lot of us just kind of blindly go through our day without having to access that. So,
well, comedy is very much intuition. You have a sense to say something funny. Then there's another part of you that says, maybe I shouldn't say that. That might be offensive. And then, that's, to me, that's your logic. Your initial idea to say something funny or to do behavior, I think, is your intuition. So on that note, let's bring the guys in. I'm so excited to talk about Homecoming.
Yes, we have Micah and Eli, who, of course, are the co-creators and co-showrunners of Homecoming. I've been a fan of these guys for a long time because originally this show was produced as a podcast for a network I respect a lot called Gimlet Media. It was purchased by Amazon, made much larger and bigger and broader, and season 2 drops tomorrow. So excited!
I'm excited. I'll be just in. You see what happens to Walter. And
yes.
Let's bring the guys in.
I see Micah and I see Eli. I think they're. Can you guys hear us? Okay.
Sure can.
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks
for. You look like you're in a safe house. Can you talk? Is it okay?
Me or Eli?
You, because of the way the curtains are. You in your office there?
It's actually a baby room. I'll show you. But the baby doesn't spend much time in here.
Oh my God! See, I never would have gotten that. I'm fascinated by the by the backward. The best thing that's come out of a quarantine is seeing the inside of people's houses.
I know.
I'm fascinated. There was a guy on MSNBC. They were talking to him, but meanwhile, in the background, he had a skeleton. I swear to God, he had a human skeleton. And I was thinking, come on, and nobody noticed that. Anyway,
your background is very nice. It's very like you get the studiousness. It's very pleasant. It feels nice. Yeah.
My office.
Yeah.
That's my picture of Billy Wilder by my desk.
Oh, cool! Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I talk to him all the time. He looks at me like, well, this is what you wanted to do. Every time I don't want to do anything, he looks at me with a different, we were talking at the top, like parallel unit psychic, and he talks back to me, whether it's in my head or not, I don't know. But He always has like something to say to me. Like, not so easy, is it? Something like that.
That's so cool.
Before we get into the show, I got to ask, are you into conspiracy theories at all? Were you before you started writing the show?
I'm not into them like I believe in them and I'm like, oh my God, this is so true. We need to delve deeper. But, they can always be so entertaining to hear. And I think like that's the comfort of there being, the weird comfort of there being a huge conspiracy out there that would answer all the questions and that would make all the pieces fit together, I think is part of, and also messing with that, not to jump into the show right away, but sort of like confounding that expectation is a lot of what we like to do on the show, because it's like, I grew up watching the X-Files and like as the internet was like coming out, I remember that feeling of just being like, yeah, what if it's all connected? And there is this one answer. and there's a silver bullet in this whole thing. And I think like it's not, unfortunately that's not the case. So no, I'm not a believer. Very long answer, not a believer.
And so when you were doing and I haven't listened to the podcast, but when you were transferring the story from the podcast to the television show, what were some of the considerations and concessions you had to make?
Want to jump in there, Eli?
Oh, sure. I mean, the podcast was so much about the audio in itself. Like even the story was generated by just how do we tell the story in this weird format. So that affected like how many characters were in the scene, even stupid stuff like, when someone handed someone else an object, we had to come up with all these ways to let people know what was going on. So once we started doing a television show, it just felt like taking off a heavy overcoat. We had so much more freedom, so much more ability to just keep things moving and run through the story, which, is a challenge in itself also, but it felt freeing mostly.
The show is, I'm sure other people have mentioned this, is very, very cinematic. And were there any kind of movies that you draw inspiration from? There were certain things I saw, like when she was in the car, and again, I don't know this may, but Julia Roberts is in the car as Heidi, it looked a little like Psycho. There were just different little homages going on, and also the music. The music, I was having fun recognizing. Wait a minute, I know where that's from. So I know that's two questions, but answer the cinematic one first, and then we'll get to the music.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I call it like the vintagey feel, especially of season 1, came a lot out of our dialogue with Sam Esmail, the director, who is like a total devout film nerd buff. I don't know if you've spoken to him, but like he will drop everything to debate the best Francis Ford Coppola movie or like whatever it is you want to talk about. So I think like he definitely saw the Hitchcock elements of the story, and he saw what made it a traditional thriller, but he was also interested in the way that people like De Palma sort of used and kind of use the formality of the Hitchcockian era in a way that sort of unsettles the viewer. And I think the opening of season 1 is a great example of that, because it's the score from Dressed to Kill, which has that syrupy too much feel that you kind of get when you watch a Brian De Palma film, where you're just kind of like, this is so much movie, I almost don't know how to read what's going on right now. And then as the story continues and then the narrative clicks into place, of course you end up getting gripped, and then you end up enthralled all the more to like how powerful movies can be. So I think Sam was fascinated by the sort of like the meta layering of that. So it's a copy of De Palma, which is a copy of Hitchcock, which is, so and the cycle of that. And I think the music did a great job also of just like throwing people off kilter and having them be confused about what world they're in. And we discussed that a good deal. Yeah, I mean, and it was sort of a dialogue that went throughout the editing.
Well, I think what it does is it connotes a certain familiarity that makes you understand. It's another tool that I would not have thought of that makes you understand the scene in a sense. You kind of know what you're going to be in for.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think the plan was that the music was originally it was going to all be from like 1970s paranoid thrillers, and then it slowly that became difficult. The supply was used up by episode like 2 or something. So then it was like,
I know
there's from the 80s, but from the 60s, there was like some very random choices in the mix.
There really was. I said, wait a minute, what is David Shire doing in the mix of? I couldn't place which movie it was, but I said, that's a David Shire soundtrack. I'm not sure which one it was from, but All the President's Men was that was kind of underground. I got that one. And I think there was some Mario Bava in there.
I don't know offhand. I know by the end, we were pulling cues from movies like the Billy Zane version of Phantom. Because they had to pull from the Universal Library. So like they didn't want to break their rule about having it be from an older movie, but that became kind of the only rule. So it was like a cue from it actually did become what's the cheapest cue that fits the purpose by the very, very end, because
I
it's
love it.
very expensive to do it that way.
I know, but it was fun. It was fun for me.
Yeah.
So for people who haven't seen the show, I mean, I guess give us a basic sort of what the premise is. It's called Homecoming. It's about these veterans who've come back from the Iraq War, and fill in the rest for me.
Well, yeah, these veterans are in a facility to help them transition back to civilian life. And in season 1, this woman, Heidi, played by Julia Roberts, is their therapist. And as the season progresses, you start to see that not everything is as it seems in this facility.
That's certainly true. And what is her relation? And so she becomes specifically involved with a character named Walter, Stephen James, who's played by Stephen James. And what is the nature of their relationship in the show in terms of what their journey is?
Well, it starts off as a therapist or caseworker client, very professional. She wants to help him. And then I think as the show progresses, it turns into something more complicated than that. There are like hints of romance, but there's also sort of, as you learn more about Heidi and her purpose there, there's sort of a sinister aspect as she learns more about what she's doing to there and why Walter is there. So that sort of like romantic relationship that is very, very subtle and sort of is this even happening kind of thing starts to collide with the outside forces and what brought them there together.
Yes, and we're also going to, in season 2, will we meet, and it's called Geist. Is Geist the sort of ownership? It was so funny when I saw the Geist. I grew up in Connecticut, so it reminds me of very Connecticut. We drive by and there's a huge field and just a stone name, and you go, "What is going on in that building? Is it aliens? Is it technology?" You know. So the company, which is great. So it's sort of like a corporation within a corporation within a corporation, and somewhere there is Mr. Geist, who is behind all of this. Is he going to make an appearance in season 2, or can we know that or not know that? Or
yeah, there's a lot of Leonard Geist, the founder of the Geist Group, and that's played by Chris Cooper in season 2, who does an amazing job. And so, yeah, in season 1, you just get little whispers of that there's this larger company, because mostly we're very much trapped in this facility. And so, yeah, so then in the second season, we delve into that corporation, but it's not really what you'd expect. You know, we're sort of playing off the assumptions of this kind of slick corporate mastermind, and we try and steer in the opposite direction. It's much more, it's kind of a wellness company, and he's a cranky old botanist who's let things spiral out of control.
Well, there's always a lot of red herrings, you know, because you don't really know who's good or who's bad. Is it ever hard for the actors to keep track of the storyline? Do they ask you?
Yeah.
Like,
well, you know, it's funny. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. Like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. I thought I was a bad guy. I'm a good guy.
Well, there's like a twist for one of our characters played by Hong Chow, named Audrey Temple. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And she sort of has a scene in season 1 that becomes crucial in season 2. You see her topple Colin at the end of season 1. She sort of like takes him down in one scene.
Yes.
And season 2, we revisit that scene and we sort of understand it in a new way. And I remember we went to talk to Hong because we knew when we shot that scene that there was going to be more components to it. And I remember we sort of started to explain the complicated plot around it. And I remember her just sort of nodding and going, okay, great. And then she just like went in into the scene. But I don't think our crazy machinations really I think she kind of like took it and understood it, certainly, but it wasn't like crucial for what she was doing that day. So my experience is more with actors, their questions are about that specific scene that they're in and what's going on. And, you know, like, I guess sometimes like the questions about the broader world come up, but I haven't had too much of that. Yeah.
Hung Chow was in a movie which I loved called Downsizing. Alexander Payne. Now, can I ask? Because I was confused about that. I think I know, but when she rubs this sort of essence on her wrist. Is this to give her is this sort of microdosing? Is she giving herself like a little bit of chutzpah?
Yeah, exactly. Because this berry juice sort of mutes your trauma. And so she's had this very slick, controlled demeanor, but inside she was all butterflies and tension. So she just wants to smooth it out a little bit.
Yes, I love that. When you were working with, how far into it did you know that Julia Roberts was going to be on board when you were writing the script?
Well, we knew, it was pretty early on when after the podcast came out, a lot of people were interested in adapting it, and we sort of heard that she was interested, but it's one of these things where you're like, okay, if you say so. But then we just kept hearing it, and then it just happened, and then it was the first day of shooting, and there she was. So it was sort of all along, and it was one of these things where it just kept being true, and I guess it actually happened. It's still a little bit inexplicable.
Another, of course, it's great to see Sissy Spacek in a role. She plays her mom, who's living in Florida. Will she be back, and will their relationship continue?
Not in season 2, no, because the focus shifts away from Heidi's story to sort of some new characters. So the idea for the show has always been like a kind of hybrid anthology thing. So we want to tell a complete story each season, and in a world that's connected, in a universe that's consistent, but focused in on new characters each time.
And will the same director, Sam Esmail, be back, or will new directors come on board and put their vision in it?
Right. Yeah. This season is all this guy, Kyle Patrick Alvarez, who did an amazing job. And he sort of took a lot of season 1 as inspiration and drew from the same kind of Hitchcock language, but he also took it in really new directions because the story takes a kind of a sharp turn. So we tried to, like Micah says, make each season have its own identity, both a new lead, a new director, a new flavor like that. So season 2 has Janelle Monáe, Hong Chow, Chris Cooper, Joan Cusack, and Stefan James returns.
One of the things that I really got out of this series, the first year, just the overall picture, is of a society that's kind of being sedated slowly into acceptance of it's not that bad, and then and the series for me has a lot of that. It's really not that bad to have your memory erased. Was that ever thinking? And then as you approach season 2, is that followed through on, or is it a completely new idea?
Well, what that makes me think of is kind of Colin, because Colin has this way of making horrible things seem like inevitable, or maybe even a little helpful if you think about it the right way. I do like the scene where Colin is revealing to Heidi everything that's going on with the guys, and he makes it seem like this is really the best option that they have available to them. Yeah. So what you said, what that sparks for me is the kind of rationalizations and lies that we tell ourselves when we want something, but we have to do something kind of shitty. So I think there's a lot of that on our show, which is people have what they consider to be good intentions, or they knew what they were doing when they started. And so speed bumps come up, problems arise, and to deal with that, maybe you need to fudge some numbers, maybe some people need to get sent to a hospital, maybe some lies need to be told, but overall there's going to be a benefit. And I think what we try to do on our show is show that those decisions along the way can kind of cascade and avalanche and sort of turn into a pretty big, awful mess.
Well, I'll tell you, there's another kind of jarring moment, and you can always stop me if I'm giving too much of the show away, but where Julia Roberts decides to imbibe the food in order to start to erase her memory. And she goes in the kitchen and everybody's wearing surgical masks. It's kind of a freaky moment. And nobody does anything. And it's, so it is a little bit life becomes art in that moment, of like, we're all standing around. Nobody's really doing it. Nobody stops her. And that's what I was saying. Like the whole show feels like we're just slowly being sedated into accepting death, anything's okay,
Right. It's like, instead of dealing with the trauma head on, it's people are just trying to blunt it. And that's both for them as individuals, but also, you can even think of it on a societal level. Like, something bad happened to these men, they went to war, they were traumatized by it. What if we can just kind of put them in a facility and not have to think about them, instead of sort of confronting as a people how they ended up that way and why.
The Bobby Cannavale character, Colin, he's like your classic sniveling, villain. That again, did you draw from anybody? Were you thinking about anyone in particular, or when because it's hard to write an interesting villain, I think, and not make it a cliche.
Yeah, I was, for years before I was making money as a writer, I was a sound mixer, like a production sound mixer. So I would do like the lavs and booms and stuff. And I did narratives, but I also did like industrials, like a lot of ad work and documentaries and stuff like that. So for Colin, his voice to me is like, not to be mean to people working in advertising, it's a wonderful field, but sort of like, I would just hear hours and hours and hours of people like talking about a product or talking themselves into what we were doing that day, what we were shooting, how important it was. And there's sort of this jargon that they use to comfort themselves and sort of also throw a smoke screen over what they're actually saying. Right. And so I think I was channeling a little bit of that whenever I would work on a Colin scene. Like, he will do anything but say what's actually going on. And he has a real knack for controlling how you're looking at something just from the deluge of words that he's throwing at you. Like, I really like when Heidi says, she pitches this term optics to him in this one scene, and that really catches his attention, this word that he can use to spin what's going on. He loves that. And so that's how she gets on his wavelength in that scene.
It's funny though, because you mentioned, ad people as sort of that like artificiality, playing the game element of conducting business. But I feel like we see that a lot in Hollywood, especially above the line with like executives.
Sure. I mean, I had not experienced any of that when we were working on that. And maybe Eli has a private life as a Hollywood executive, but I'm not sure that he has either. But, I don't want to be, I've seen some of what you're talking about. Yeah, since Hollywood, I'm not, yeah.
And, something that Bobby does so well that kept it from being the kind of stereotypical villain is I feel like you can really see the effort. Colin is trying so hard to keep this together. He's not like a cool, slick guy who sees 17 moves ahead. So there's always kind of a little bit of sweat. You can see the heat and it's starting to slip out of his hands. And that's what makes him almost sympathetic, even when he's doing these awful things.
The insecurity.
He's got that great sniveling quality, like he's a real estate guy, but it's about to go sour, any millisecond, like he's overextended. You just get the feeling, even in the relationship with his wife, who is played by Sidney Poitier's daughter, Sidney.
Yeah.
I did a movie with, and who happens back before the pandemic. We used to take a Groove 3 class together.
Oh, cool.
Back in the old days. I'm curious, how did you guys meet up?
It was for this project. We had a mutual friend, and I had this sort of challenge of writing a podcast, but I definitely want someone to collaborate with. I knew I couldn't do it myself, and a mutual friend connected us, but we didn't even meet in person until the first season was fully written. We did it all over the phone and sending scripts back and forth. So, and a lot of the first season, the podcast takes place on the phone. It's phone calls between Heidi and Colin, a lot of it. So there were ways in which kind of the dialogue that we were having as we got to know each other was inflicted upon the scripts.
Wow, that's amazing. And so then, so what was your process? You wrote scenes and then read them and then pieced it together?
Yeah, we would talk. I would, we in our separate little writing spots. I think Eli would be at a coffee shop, and I was at the Bobst Library in New York, and we would talk kind of all morning and beat out the story, and then retreat and go work on the scenes, and then kind of send them back and forth to each other. And then Eli is kind of in charge of like the overall map, and then like where we were headed story wise, and then I would charge into the dialogue in the individual scenes, and then by the end of it, we had this like this, small, contained, but I think well put together story, and then got some really good actors, and then they went into a booth.
Yeah.
Do you work like in the classic way where you say what's the spine of this and break it down, or do you just write?
Well, I think one of the things that makes this work, hopefully, is that we approach things, I think, Mike and I, in very different ways. So for me, it's like architectural or like comically rational. I have to convince myself that it's all rational, not just a puzzle, and it's like a new piece of information each episode, proceeding in a thing. And so it kind of gives it a useful spine, but it can also be very dry. But then the magic of it is then sort of when I say that thing to Micah and then he goes off and writes a draft of it, it gets transported into another brain, and so it gets sort of spun up and mixed around in a new direction, and then we sort of bounce it back and forth and have fingerprints all over it. So I don't know. We don't talk about it like Hollywood executives, like stakes and stuff like that, but more just like making sure there's something new for people every episode, and we're slowly pulling back the curtain kind of inch by inch.
Do you put in sort of funny little cookies or surprises? Because like I noticed the theme of fish sort of weirdly comes up in every episode, whether it's an image or whether it's her fish tank. Is that something that you start with in the script? And if so, why fish? Why
Well, yeah. So I mean, like the fish is an interesting story because initially we needed a prop in the scene for the podcast to show that you were in Heidi's office. So a gurgling aquarium. Oh, that's a good signifier. It's a good background so that the audience always knows. Oh, I'm in Heidi's office. Then you go to you go to write the scene, and there was inside baseball a little bit in the podcast. They talk about the fish because you need to talk about it in a podcast in order for the audience to understand it. So they need to say, "Oh, look at that aquarium." We go to write the screenplay or the teleplay or whatever, and we have this bit where they talk about the fish. So it kind of stays in, not because anyone is like dying to do this part of the scene, but just sort of more because it was in the rhythm of it. But then you have a production designer and a director who see this and they're like, "Oh my God, we're gonna put the camera inside of the freaking aquarium. We're gonna pull out." And then I don't know if Eli's experience was, mine was like, "That sounds amazing, you guys. Let's totally do that. That sounds wonderful." And then, and then you send that to the marketing and advertising people, and then they're putting the fish on billboards across the city. So it sort of has a life of its own. Some of it's intentional. Others are just, I think, part of the collaborative process.
Yeah, and I think that's a microcosm of a lot of the stuff. We sort of we'll add something just as a solution to one scene, and then you sort of have it in your toolbox and you throw it in just to make yourself laugh, or because it's easy, or to entertain the other person, and then it takes on a life of its own.
That's one of the things I love about movies, is that the prop guy gets her, has fun building a little fish.
Right.
Tag, name tag when she's working at the restaurant for the 5 people like me that notice it. But I love that the way that it starts out as a writer and you write a world, and then suddenly the world starts to become really real.
Yeah.
Well, the first season was obviously incredibly well reviewed. Do you have any feel any pressure going into the second season? How do you approach the second season, not thinking about positive reviews or thinking about it?
I think those things are so spread out in time, like the show is coming out now. We started planning this, I don't even know, 2 years ago. So it's just, even if you have any little thoughts about the outside world or how it's received, once you just get into the muck with the script, it's just about problem solving and trying to get through that and trying to make a season that will, entertain ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember much sense of pressure. Maybe we felt it, people around us. There was sort of more, we were kind of left alone during the first season. The second season, I feel like there was more attention on us, and maybe that was how the reception of the first season affected us.
Interesting. And so this season you have Janelle Monáe coming in, and I've seen the promo, but can you tell me a little bit more about where this season will go and who she plays?
Yeah, so Janelle, so season 2 starts far afield from where we left off, and we start with her waking up in a boat, and she doesn't know who she is, and she's off in the middle of nowhere. And all that she has is this military ID. So your kind of brain can kind of go from there about what might be going on. And then we follow her character back to some of the issues and locations that we established in season 1, back to sort of the Heart of Geist group, and learn more and see more about what's going on there. So as Eli mentioned, we've got Chris Cooper playing Leonard Geist, which is, we sort of wanted to do our best to upend the expectation of like the sleek suited CEO. So he's a sort of a hippie farmer who is unexpectedly kind of one of the most upright people in the season. And we got Joan Cusack, who is in a way like kind of our idea of a heavy for the season, but as you'll see, it's pretty strange. And then Hong Chow and Stefan James returning as the roles they established in season 1.
So yeah, I mean, well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and it's coming out like this weekend, right?
Yeah, on Friday.
Like moments, yeah.
Day. Do you want to stay in television, or do you guys want to continue to write together?
I don't know. We haven't talked about it.
Oh, so well, I'll bring it up now.
There's I think pluses and minuses to television that we found. I mean, for both of us, this is our first show, and in a way, it's so exciting, and there's so many different talented people that come together, like what you mentioned about the prop guy, and that's what's my favorite part, is like some tiny half germ of an idea you have, someone takes and runs with it and makes it so much beyond anything you could have thought of. At the same time, we started with this podcast where it's really just like the whole group was like 4 people or something, and recorded it all in 4 days. And, there's also something really nice about just how finite and controllable, and you can have it all in the palm of your hand. No conference calls, you have to wait for permission. So, I'm still trying to imagine if there's some way to have the best of both worlds, but probably that's naive.
I kind of think it matters a little bit less in this business when I'm sensing like, even if you set an intention to be like, oh, I'm going to continue working in TV, like, I wonder how much that would even affect it. Like, what's funny is we wanted to just make a good podcast. Like, we never, ever once, honest to God, were like, and it'll be great TV IP. You'll see. Like, we just really were focused on that to make this like radio drama, basically. And that accomplished this goal that, and I don't want to sound glib, it accomplished this goal that should have taken 5 years. It happened in 1 year, So I think maybe diverting your attention and doing other stuff, or just doing things that are expedient, might end up doing your career a little bit better, although I have no idea.
Did you ever approach, or have you heard from the military or the CIA or anybody that actually like, hey, I saw your show. How did you know we were doing that for the past 20 years? Because there's so many strange things that suddenly you hear about of, terrible things they were doing to soldiers and, things over the years. So have you ever heard from anyone in the military?
As a response, did we get some emails to the Homecoming account, Eli? I'm vaguely
remembering. Well, there were some veterans who contacted afterwards, and that was kind of the most meaningful thing. That's where something about the show really echoed their experience. Not that like the more crazy sci-fi elements, but just people struggling with these issues and the question of if you could forget, would you forget? In terms of like, no, the CIA has not at least identified themselves in any contacts with us. In a way, though, this stuff is real. Like this was based on actual medication that they do use to work with PTSD, but by kind of reframing the memories in your head. So that was the germ of it. So there's some of it that is actually happening. Hopefully not quite as spooky.
Well, I kind of wanted to ask about that. Yeah, just, you mentioned the sci-fi elements, but one thing I love about the show, possibly my favorite thing, is how grounded it feels. You're not relying on special effects or, memory wiping technology. It all kind of feels like it's grounded in a world that could very plausibly exist. Is that an objective for you guys, or you discuss it as you're writing?
I think that's really a function of our collaboration. Like, I tend to be a little bit more into those genre elements and those sort of like, what if, there were crazy storm, like space stormtroopers or something like that.
Mhm.
And I think like we establish like a dynamic that way. And I think Eli is really good at making sure that the story stays within a realm that an audience member can like fathom it and like kind of get it, and also not have that feeling of being like, because you can kind of dismiss something when you see that it's just a copy of a genre feeling, or that they're taking so much like Hollywood license. So to me, that's a good example of there's these wisps in air of like things that seem true, but is that true, and seem kind of out there, but they have this weight and are kind of grounded in a cool way. I think that's a good sort of view of our two sensibilities.
Cool.
It also has to do with the way they film it too. That must be really exciting because, he makes, to make berries look ominous or make pineapple seem scary. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world,
Yeah, Sam and Kyle are both great at establishing tension with very subtle choices, like where the camera is, how long you hold a shot, the way that the music feels against the image. And like something very normal, like Heidi is just talking on the phone with her boss, but if you throw the mechanisms at it the way that Sam does in that like big one, or in episode 1 of season 1, you just know there's more going on. So I think both of our directors, Sam and Kyle, have that ability to introduce that layer of cinematic tension on top of something that can seem kind of mundane.
Yeah, it was very cinematic. Like I was never a fan of shaky cam, so because I thought it sort of distracted from the acting, and I like this where you actually get to see people act. It's very slow. It's sort of abnormally slow, compared to other dramas.
Yeah, because it began as this podcast that was really just conversational, and so I think that's what was the real value of what Sam and Kyle did, was they let us keep that structure of being really character-based, dialogue-based, long scenes, conversations, hopefully not slow ones, but still that's the kind of thing you're not allowed to do in TV very much. And because of all the effort they took in the framing and the style and the aesthetic, that's what gave those sort of quieter scenes a heightened drama.
Well, as a related format question, like the half-hour drama is such an unexplored space in TV. Like it's very new. I mean, up until 10 years ago, it was either 22-minute comedies or 44-minute dramas. And I don't know, do you guys feel like you were sort of entering uncharted territory as you were like drafting these scripts?
Well, no, because the podcast episodes were a half hour. So when we were in development, it like the question came up, and I think it was just like, because it was already in scene form and we'd worked on the story so much to make it into a podcast, it really did feel like if we stretched it to an hour, we would just be adding bloat. We would just be doing it to hit some number so that it could qualify as a drama. And I think there had been before like Girlfriend Experience and other shows that were not comedies in half-hour space. And I think it felt very easy for us to transition that way. And now you see like shows like Normal People and other awesome different kinds of dramas that are half hours. So I just think that whole thing is going to start to fall away more. And it's sort of like a network 90 or whatever, like decades old sort of TV convention that doesn't seem particularly necessary right now.
So as you as we've been here has quarantine affected you at all? Like, or in terms of going forward, or I mean, you guys had already finished the show, I imagine, right?
Right. It messed with a lot of the promo and stuff, but yeah, the timing for that worked very well. Post was finished just before this all began.
Super lucky. Yeah, super lucky.
Yeah.
Is that at all something you can think about or not? I know everybody's got ideas and thoughts about that, but what are your guys' thoughts as we plow?
Well, I feel it must be so awful. I know there's lots of different kinds of suffering around and lots of different kinds of problems, but the people who are about to head into production or who are in production, or obviously your whole life can get focused on these dates and things happening, and then to have that thrown into chaos must be terrible. So we're really grateful that we were so lucky about that. And then moving forward, yeah, production wise, I'd be interested what you guys are hearing. Like it's very, can we shoot it in California? Can we do it with these limitations? What's the liability going to be? I think
Yeah.
it's crazy. I don't know how it's gonna, what the deal is. I don't think anybody knows what the deal is gonna be.
How does it affect art? Is everything going to be, CGI? It's very, very nerve wracking. For sure. I mean, I feel like it's a good time to write, just to be alone and to write, maybe free of writing what you think a particular place wants. So in that sense, it's been good. How has been your experience? I've been working on Goliath for Amazon. They're shut down, but I've loved working with Amazon. I've had a great experience. How is your experience? Did they sort of leave you alone, or how's the notes experience?
It's been a mixture. I think, I mean, they sort of launched us into this thing and gave us so much freedom, which we're really grateful for. I think it's been interesting. We've been there for, I guess, basically 3 years now, sort of through 2 different regimes, I guess. So it's been interesting to watch how they are sort of evolving as a network, and I think trying to shift their focus. And so we're just sort of, no one tells us anything directly, just sort of as a bystander. So I think that's probably just part of the business, to try and roll with those punches and keep up with that.
That's why I said everything seems like Geist. You don't know who, everything. Doll, you don't really know who the owner is, but I feel like they have carved out a kind of a nice niche for themselves in terms of things that are a little off or a little mysterious. Parallel universe. Did you hear at the top of the show talking about parallel universes? Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Did you hear about that at all?
Did they discover that there are in fact parallel universes?
Yeah, NASA. There was just a weird, but nobody's commenting on it. NASA put out some data that they think there might be a parallel universe. That's all.
That's huge news. I did not hear that. I don't know why that's not on my phone.
I know. Nobody's talking about it.
Well, and then a month ago, they released the footage of those UFOs, and I'm just like, well, that's weird. And then go on with our life.
Season 3.
Yeah, there we go. Season 3.
Maybe you need Dan Aykroyd's a big UFO guy. He'd be a good. I'd like to see him on your show. Is there anybody you'd like to see on your show?
Oh wow, Dan Aykroyd's actually, that's a great
idea. That'd be a fun one. Yeah,
I'd like to get all the Steve Martin, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy. That would be cool, just to do an SNL tribute season and just pull entirely from SNL actors, new and old. That's my idea. That's what I'm saying right now.
Get some Kevin Nealon in there or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Comedians always make great villains.
They do.
Okay, we got to wrap this up. My last question, which we can't do a show without asking: do you remember the first movie you saw, and who took you to see it?
For me, I think the first one in the theater was E.T. And I think my mom took me, and then I guess it was probably the summertime. I was in Virginia, so it was a big thunderstorm, and the power went out in the middle of the movie. So, and I was 5. So it was the most memorable experience of my life.
Wow. That one sounds really great. Micah, how about you?
Harry and the Hendersons, which was a great, amazing movie. And I was spellbound. And then my grandma slipped leaving and fell on her hip and broke her hip. So there was like this whole crazy follow-up. So it was a very memorable day, but I think about that movie often. Yeah, that was my first time.
Yeah, both of you guys have memorable. That's a memorable one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here and taking the time. I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to see what happens. It's a good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having us. Really huge fan. Really great to get to meet you. Yeah.
Great to meet you. If there's a Homecoming 3, I'm in there. Me and
You got it. We'll remember.
Okay. All right, you guys have a great day. Best of luck to you. Talk soon.
Bye.
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 And Jeff, well,
that was it.
Until next week. That was super fun. It was great to see you.
You too.
As thanks for the questions, guys. Take a look at these books. We'll see you next week with a new guest. And as we end the show, we always like to say everyone's life is like a movie with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is the end of our movie for today. And have a great day. Hi, Connecticut. Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.